Long as I'm keeping it between the lines of talking basketball, then I can't worry about if a motherfucker go getting their feelings, dog.
The moment Kendrick Perkins went live on Instagram, nobody expected it to end the way it did. Not his fans, not the media, not the people inside Bristol who were watching it happen in real time. And definitely not Stephen A. Smith. Because what started as a casual Friday night IG live, the kind of thing athletes and analysts do all the time to connect with their audience, turned into something that nobody in sports media had seen in a long, long time. A man with a platform, a contract, and absolutely nothing to lose, saying the quiet part loud, in front of hundreds of thousands of people.
Is this LeBron's most challenging path to a title?
Hell no, Molly. No, and no. And anybody think different is crazy.
Without a script, without a filter, without a single person in his ear telling him to slow down. And by the time that live ended, the internet was already on fire. But here's the thing about this story. The version you've been watching in the thumbnails, the one where Perkins is standing at the gates demanding Stephen A. Smith's head, that version is missing all the context that makes this actually interesting. And the context is what we're going to give you today. Because Kendrick Perkins didn't just wake up one morning and decide to burn everything down. This was years in the making. This was a man pushed to a specific breaking point by a specific series of events, and the fact that it spilled out on Instagram Live instead of staying inside the walls of ESPN's Bristol campus says everything about where sports media is right now and where it's going.
I'm crazy, damn it!
The biggest challenge.
Let's start from the beginning. To understand why this moment hit different, you have to understand who Kendrick Perkins actually is. Not the loud guy on your screen, not the meme, the actual human being underneath all of it. Kendrick Ladale Perkins grew up in Netherland, Texas. If you haven't heard of it, that's not a coincidence. It's a small town outside of Beaumont that most people couldn't locate on a map with a Jeeps and a prayer. He grew up in an environment where nobody was handing you anything, where the only currency that mattered was how hard you were willing to work and how long you were willing to keep going when everything around you was saying stop. And Kendrick Perkins never stopped. By the time he was finishing high school at Clifton J. Ozen in Beaumont, he was putting up numbers that barely looked real. 27.5 points per game, 16.4 rebounds, 7.8 blocks. He was a McDonald's All-American. He was Texas Mr. Basketball. He was, in every sense of the word, a monster.
We already know that. Just from hearing your tone, I know you about to disagree with me, and I knew we couldn't go a whole show without getting into it.
And in 2003, the Memphis Grizzlies took him 27th overall straight out of high school. No college, no waiting, just gone. He got traded almost immediately to the Boston Celtics, and what happened next was one of the quieter great careers in modern NBA history. Not quiet because he was invisible, quiet because his value lived in places the box score didn't always capture, in the way opposing players changed their drives when he was standing in the paint, in the way his teammates played harder because they knew he was behind them, in the way every single person in the building felt his presence before he ever touched the ball. He was there in 2008 when the Celtics won it all. He was the enforcer in that lineup, the protector, the guy nobody on the other team wanted to test. Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo, all of them in front of him. All of them playing with the kind of freedom that only comes when you know the guy behind you will make anyone who drives the lane regret it immediately.
When LeBron James went back to Cleveland, okay?
Right.
That was his hardest path.
His fingerprints were all over that championship. And then the knee. Game 6 of the 2010 Finals against the Lakers. He comes down on a rebound and tears his ACL, MCL, and PCL in the same moment. The Celtics lost Game 7 without him, and people have been arguing about what that series looks like if he stays healthy for 15 years and counting. He recovered. He got traded to Oklahoma City. He helped them reach the 2012 Finals. He played 14 seasons. He earned over $57 million. He suited up for franchises across the league, and he showed up every single night the same way. Physical, tough, vocal, uncompromising. That's who walks into ESPN in 2019 trying to figure out television. And that matters, because when you understand where Perkins came from, when you understand that this is a man who spent his entire life learning how to earn things that weren't being offered to him, the way he navigated his media career starts making a lot more sense. He didn't arrive at ESPN with a polished demo reel and a media coach in his corner. He showed up raw. He started on a day rate, roughly $2,500 per appearance, grinding through guest spots and trying to build something from scratch in an industry he had never trained for. There's a version of that story where a man who already made $57 million in his playing career decides the grind isn't worth it and goes home. Perkins was not that version. He treated his rookie analyst contract the same way he treated his rookie NBA contract. Show up, prove yourself, outwork the next person, don't stop. And slowly, it started to click.
I was in that locker room, not when he won the title, but I was there the 2 years before then when he had lost to Golden State.
The audience responded to him not because he was smooth or polished or perfectly on message, but because he was real. Because when Perkins sat down in front of a camera and started talking about basketball, you knew every single word was coming from somewhere genuine. He wasn't performing an opinion. He was telling you what he actually believed. And that is an extraordinarily rare thing in sports media, which is exactly why Stephen A. Smith noticed. Now we need to talk about this relationship properly, because the way YouTube titles frame it and the way the actual dynamic works are two completely different things, and conflating them is going to make you misunderstand everything that comes after. When Perkins had burned through his allotted appearance days during the 2020-21 playoffs and the network bureaucracy was prepared to shut him down for the season, Stephen A. Smith picked up the phone.
Who has the best roster in the Western Conference? Out of all those teams you name, who has the best roster?
He wanted Perkins on First Take for a full week during the highest viewership stretch of the year, and when the people who handle those decisions said no, Smith didn't file a memo. He called Perkins directly, told him to relax, said he'd handle it, said he'd be hearing from the bosses the next day. The next day, the bosses called. And ESPN didn't just approve more appearance days. They tore up his existing contract, which still had a year left on it, and replaced it with a brand new 3-year deal worth approximately $700,000 per year. One phone call. That's the foundation.
To correct something here from yesterday's show, when Kendrick Perkins said 80% of NBA voters for the MVP award are white.
And Perkins has never pretended it didn't happen. He has said publicly and repeatedly that he has Stephen A. Smith's back against anybody because Smith had his back when it counted most. There is genuine loyalty there. There is genuine gratitude. And for a long time, that gratitude shaped everything about how Perkins moved inside that building. But here's what happens when you're a man of deep loyalty and deep conviction, and those two things start pulling in opposite directions. Eventually, something gives. The on-air debates between Perkins and Stephen A. were never gentle. They were never polite exchanges of differing viewpoints. They were full contact, full volume, fully committed arguments between two people who genuinely believed what they were saying and were completely unwilling to back down from it. And the audience loved every second of it. The energy on that set when those two locked in on a disagreement was something television producers dream about, because you cannot manufacture it. It either exists or it doesn't, and between these two, it absolutely existed. The LeBron debates became the signature.
Lost some friends, like some real Russ, KD, Braun.
Perkins has always been a LeBron defender, and not in the hollow talk show way where somebody picks a side to be contrarian. In the way that comes from a man who was actually in those locker rooms, who played alongside him, who watched up close what LeBron James brings to a franchise and to the people around him. When the debate turned to LeBron's championship paths, his legacy, the difficulty of competition he faced in various eras, Perkins wasn't reading from a script. He was pulling from memory. He was there. And that credibility, that lived experience, was exactly what made him so compelling to watch. He went deep on the Cleveland return, the Dan Gilbert relationship, the hostile ownership environment, the weight of going back to a city that had been publicly humiliated by the decision and winning them a championship anyway, coming back 3-1 down against a 73-win Warriors team and finishing it. He argued that was the hardest thing LeBron had ever done, not because of the basketball alone, but because of everything wrapped around the basketball. Stephen A. pushed back every single time. He always acknowledged the emotional argument but pivoted to competition volume, Western Conference depth, the gauntlet LeBron was navigating in later years. Utah, Phoenix, the Clippers, Denver, two smart men. Two legitimate perspectives, zero agreement every time. That was the show.
I really didn't want to touch on it because I'm like, bro, first of all, we shouldn't be talking about the 55th pick. But then we get to diving into it.
That had always been the show. But then March 2023 happened. During an MVP race discussion on First Take, Perkins made a claim that stopped the room cold. He stated on air that roughly 80% of NBA MVP voters were white, pointed to a pattern of white winners including Nikola Jokic, Dirk Nowitzki, and Steve Nash, noted they weren't top 10 scorers, and said, quote, "What do those guys have in common? I'll let it sit there and marinate." The implication was clear. The set got uncomfortable fast. JJ Redick, who was co-hosting, confronted him directly. The debate turned personal and awkward in a way studio debate shows almost never do. Stephen A. later acknowledged the discomfort, said both sides had gone too far, said he'd had to step in. And the very next day, ESPN didn't just move on from it. They issued a public correction and apology on air for Perkins's comments. A public correction.
Bronny wasn't supposed to be a McDonald's All-American. I don't even believe he made All-State in California. I'm not trying to shit on him. I'm keeping it real.
On air, That's not a quiet meeting in someone's office. That's the network going on record saying what our analyst said was factually wrong, and here is the correction. Charles Barkley got involved, called it one of the stupidest things he'd ever heard, mocked it on Inside the NBA with a sarcastic callback that went viral almost immediately. And even after all of that, the correction, the Barkley mockery, the nationwide backlash, Perkins was still on the air. He wasn't suspended, he wasn't disciplined publicly, he showed back up because at ESPN, controversy is not automatically a career ender. Sometimes it's the opposite, and Perkins knew it, which is part of why he kept going. By late 2024, his position at the network was about as secure as it gets. ESPN had announced another multi-year deal in October of that year, expanding his role across NBA Countdown, ABC's NBA Countdown, NBA Today, First Take, Get Up, SportsCenter, and Hoop Streams. He was everywhere. He was established. He was, by any reasonable measure, one of the most visible NBA analysts in the entire country. And with that, security came something that was either admirable confidence or the kind of boldness that makes network executives check their blood pressure, depending on which day you caught it. The debates with Stephen A. didn't slow down. They escalated.
Long as I'm keeping it between the lines of talking basketball, then I can't worry about if a motherfucker go getting their feelings, dog.
In March 2025, after Nikola Jokic dropped a 31-point, 21-rebound, 22-assist, triple-double performance, Perkins went on NBA Countdown and started building toward a Jokic MVP argument, and Smith cut him off mid-sentence. Not diplomatically, not gently. He looked directly at Perkins and said, "You are not doing that today. Big Perk, we're not gonna do this today, and we ain't gonna start this narrative where all of a sudden Shai Gilgeous-Alexander gets compromised for league MVP. A colleague shutting you down on national television, in front of millions of viewers, not debating you, shutting you down." And Perkins didn't fold. He never folds. But something about that moment stayed with him, because there's a line between a debate partner pushing back and a debate partner deciding what you're allowed to say. And the further you went into 2025, the more that line was getting tested. Not just on air, behind the scenes, in the building.
When the Warriors came into town, they played the Brooklyn Nets. Who was Stephen A. sitting next to with his legs crossed? Joe Lacob, okay? That's his partner.
In the way decisions were getting made about who got airtime and who got cut off, and whose narratives got amplified, and whose got dismissed before they could even finish the sentence. Perkins had talked about this in the past, about losing friends over takes, about former teammates going cold on him because of things he said on television, about the price you pay when you decide that honesty is more important than comfort. And for years, he had paid that price inside the building the same way he paid it outside of it, without apology, without adjustment, without backing down. But the IG Live changed something. It was a Friday night, the kind of situation that starts casual and then spirals in the way only live video can spiral. Because there's no editing room, no producer in your ear, no version of the clip that gets reviewed before it goes out. It's just you and the audience and whatever is sitting on your chest that you've been carrying around for longer than you probably realized. Perkins went live, and at first it was what it always is. Ball talk, takes, the audience throwing questions at him firing answers back the way he always does, comfortable, in his element. And then someone asked him about the situation with Stephen A. And the answer that came out was not the polished version. It was not the version you give in a scheduled interview where you've thought through every word and you know the cameras are rolling. It was the version that comes out when a man has been holding something for a long time, and the right question in the right moment at the right hour finally opens the valve.
Hold on. And then you have to realize.
I mean, he's getting a little bit too specific.
He talked about what it felt like to be the person in that building who was willing to say the uncomfortable thing and have the man who was supposed to have your back be the first one to cut you off in front of the audience. He talked about a pattern, not one moment, a pattern, a feeling like the debates that were supposed to be real were starting to have invisible guardrails around them, of sensing that certain narratives were protected and certain takes were tolerated, and if you pushed against the wrong ones at the wrong time, you were going to feel it. He said the name, Stephen A. Smith. He said it clearly, and he said it without the kind of careful framing that keeps things deniable. He said that the relationship had shifted, that what started as genuine mentorship and genuine loyalty had developed a power imbalance that he was no longer willing to pretend didn't exist. And then he said the thing that made the clip go everywhere. He said ESPN needed to take a hard look at who was actually running that building, at who had enough influence to determine what got debated and how and by whom. And he said that if the network was serious about having real voices and real conversations, the answer to that question was going to make some people very uncomfortable. He did not use the word fired. Let's be precise about that. The thumbnail said it, the title said it, but Perkins on that live was more surgical than that. He was describing a structural problem and pointing at the person he believed sat at the center of it, and he was doing it on Instagram with hundreds of thousands of people watching and zero ability to take it back. The clip hit the internet, and the internet did what the internet does. Within hours, it was everywhere. Dunk Central had it, Bleacher Report had it, every NBA commentary channel with a camera and a microphone was running it. The framing ranged from Perkins calls out Stephen A to Perk wants Smith gone to the more dramatic ESPN Civil War. The comment sections broke into the exact two camps you'd expect.
We already
I had a soft spot for Steph Curry. I thought you said Steph Curry.
Half the people saying it was the most courageous thing anyone in sports media had done in years. The other half saying it was career suicide from a man too confident in his own security. And back at ESPN, behind those walls in Bristol, the conversation was happening in a very different register. Because here's the thing about saying something like that publicly when you are under contract to the network you're talking about. The contract doesn't protect you from consequences. It just means the consequences have paperwork around them. And the people who make decisions about what happens next to Kendrick Perkins were suddenly in a position they had not anticipated being in on a random Friday night. Stephen A. Smith responded. Not immediately. Not on Instagram. He let the cycle run for a minute, let the conversation breathe, and then he addressed it the way he addresses everything, loudly and with complete confidence that he was right. He said the characterization was unfair. He said that anyone who looked at the record could see that he had championed Perkins from day one, had put his own credibility on the line to get him a contract that changed his life, and that the idea he would now turn around and try to undermine that same person was not just wrong, but borderline insulting given the history. He said he wasn't going to apologize for having strong opinions on his own show. He said that was what people tuned in for, and that Perkins of all people should understand that. And then he said the line that landed everywhere. He said Kendrick Perkins is one of the best things that ever happened to First Take, and I'll say that to anybody. But that doesn't mean I have to agree with him, and it doesn't mean he gets to say whatever he wants without somebody in that room pushing back. Because that room has standards, and those standards apply to everybody.
We talked about that, Perk.
Only one can make it, VC.
Big bottles. Hey, it's like the little bottles, VC. I'm spending big money.
The standards line. That's the one the internet ran with. Because to Perkins' supporters, that sounded like exactly the kind of coded language he had been describing on the live. The quiet implication that there are rules, and you'd better understand who's setting them. And to Stephen A.'s supporters, it sounded completely reasonable, because, of course, a program has standards, and of course, those apply to everyone on the roster. Both readings were available, and that ambiguity is exactly what made the whole situation impossible to cleanly resolve. Inside the building, sources described the situation as tense, but not terminal. Nobody was getting fired. Nobody was being suspended. The relationship between Perkins and Smith was described as complicated in the way that any two strong personalities who have genuine history and genuine disagreement are always going to be complicated. The show was still going to happen. The debates were still going to happen. The cameras were still going to roll. But something had been said publicly that couldn't be unsaid, and everyone in that building knew it. What happened next is the part that the drama narrative gets wrong. Because the narrative wants a clean ending. Either Perkins wins and Smith gets humbled, or Smith wins and Perkins gets pushed out. The internet needs resolution. The YouTube algorithm feeds on it. But real life doesn't operate on those terms. What actually happened was messier and more honest than any clean ending. Perkins came back. He was on First Take the following week. He was on NBA Countdown. He was doing his job. He and Stephen A. were in the same room, and the tension that had been private for years and then very briefly public was now sitting in the air between them like smoke, visible to anyone paying attention, not talked about directly, but absolutely present. And the debates continued, because that's the thing about Kendrick Perkins that the people who want a simple story keep missing. He did not go on that Instagram Live because he wanted out. He went on that Instagram Live because he wanted in, because he wanted the relationship between personalities and power at that network to be honest, because he had spent his entire life in environments where the only way to change something broken was to say out loud that it was broken even when everyone around you was pretending they couldn't see it. He's not trying to burn ESPN down, he's trying to make ESPN be the thing it says it is, a place where real takes from real people with real experience get real airtime without invisible guardrails deciding in advance which conversations are allowed to go all the way. And that's the part of this story that matters beyond the headlines and the thumbnails and the drama cycle. Because what Perkins put his finger on, what he was describing in that IG Live and in every moment leading up to it, is a tension that exists at the heart of modern sports media. The tension between authentic voices and the structures that are supposed to amplify them, but very often end up controlling them instead. The tension between a network that wants the rawness and the realness that someone like Perkins brings, and a network that also has relationships to protect and narratives to manage, and a single dominant personality whose comfort level quietly shapes what's possible on every show he touches. That tension is not unique to ESPN. It is ESPN. It is every sports media organization that has ever tried to bottle genuine human voices and sell them as product. And Kendrick Perkins, man from Netherlands, Texas, who earned a championship he almost lost on a bad knee, who built a second career from scratch at a day rate while people twice as polished and half as honest were collecting paychecks, who said on live television that if ESPN fired him today, he would lose zero sleep because Boston would pick him up. That man has decided that the tension is worth addressing even if the address costs him something. That's not recklessness. That's not self-destruction. That's a specific kind of courage that you can only have when you know exactly who you are and exactly how you got there, and you've decided that pretending otherwise is a price you simply are not willing to pay. In December of 2024, Perkins said his long-term goal was for his media career to be better than his playing career. His playing career included an NBA championship and $57 million and 14 years at the highest level of professional basketball. He wants to top that. And the way he's going about trying to do it, by being the person in every room who tells the truth, even when the truth makes powerful people uncomfortable, is either the smartest long game in sports media or the most expensive principle in Bristol's recent history. Maybe both. As of spring 2026, Kendrick Perkins is still at ESPN, still on First Take, still on NBA Countdown. No reported changes to his role, no disciplinary action, no public resolution to the underlying tension that the IG Live put on display. He and Stephen A. Smith are still in the same building, still sharing a set, still going at each other in ways that keep millions of people watching. And that's the only ending this story has right now. Not a clean one, not a resolved one, a continuing one. Because the real version of this is not Perkins versus Smith. It's not a fight, it's not a rivalry. It's two men who built something real together trying to figure out whether that something can survive the weight of one of them refusing to stop being exactly who he is. The jury is still out on that. But as long as Kendrick Perkins has a microphone, the answer is going to keep coming. Loudly, directly, without apology. That's always been the deal.